Much has been said about the Shibuya Incident arc. There have been a few people who have their complaints about it, but overall I would say the overwhelming majority who have read this arc feel this is one of the best shonen arcs of all time, including your tribal chief. When I was reading through this arc, it felt like every chapter ended in a cliffhanger. There was more twists and turns and epic fights to go along with this arc. The arc in total is around 57 chapters. It starts from chapter 79 and ends in chapter 136, but it felt so much less than that. When I was reading through, it felt like an arc that contained around 20 to 30 chapters, rather than nearly having 60 chapters covering the whole arc. I'm not going to go through over every single detail of this arc. There have been countless other YouTubers who have covered the arc in depth, so you can check their videos out if you want to have a summary of what happened in the Shibuya Incident arc. But for me, when I was reading through this arc for the first time, I couldn't help but feel there was something very familiar about this arc. We had the older brother / mentor figure of our main character having a solo fight at the beginning of the arc and was winning, but then got captured and is imprisoned in the prison realm. After our main heroes heard the news, the main arc objective became, we have to now save Gojo, otherwise the balance of the world will be shifted. Doesn't this sound a little too familiar? We had Ace, the older brother of Luffy, fighting off against Blackbeard by himself, and because of Blackbeard's overpowered devil fruit, he managed to capture Ace and hand him over to the world government. Granted, Ace gave a damn good fight against Blackbeard and his crew. He even managed to do a few critical hits on Blackbeard, but Blackbeard's powers are so overpowered. It's not that Ace was weak, far from that. It's just that Blackbeard's powers are too broken. After he got captured, the whole Marineford war arc was centered around saving Ace, with the Whitebeard pirates and Luffy leading the charge. But the ramifications of this war will affect the balance of the world of One Piece for the remainder of the story. Can you connect the dots between the two arcs? Gojo is the Ace of Jujutsu Kaisen, who, like Ace, got captured in battle against the main enemy and needs rescuing, otherwise the world itself will fall into chaos. The Shibuya Incident arc is basically the war arc for Jujutsu Kaisen, as we had our main heroes face off against the cursed spirits in a closed space in Shibuya, which is what happened in Marineford, as the war in Marineford took place in a closed off space in Marineford itself. This is not the only similarity. The journey that Luffy went through to even get to the platform that Ace was at, you can make the argument that's the same journey that Yuji and the rest of our heroes go through to get to Kenjaku and the special grade cursed spirits in order to save Gojo from the prison realm. Our heroes in Jujutsu Kaisen had to break the barrier of the Shibuya train station by starting outside at Shibuya Tower and then enter the station and fight the likes of Chozo, Dagon, Mahito, as well as the army of transfigured humans. The transfigured humans are like the fodder marines that Luffy had to go through in order to get to Ace. However, in the middle of the arc, once all the fighting is going on, both in the Marineford arc and Shibuya Incident arc, we finally see a monstrous enemy arrive and obliterate everyone. In Marineford, we had the third Logia Admiral reveal himself, finally joining the fight after Kizaru and Aokiji already joined the fight against the Whitebeard pirates, Admiral Sakazuki, aka Akainu. And he was doing major damage throughout the entire arc, punching a hole through Whitebeard's chest and obliterating a chunk of his face in the manga. In the Shibuya Incident arc, we had Sukuna being unleashed thanks to Jogo feeding 10 fingers to Yuji in chapter 111, and all hell broke loose after Sukuna was unleashed. Sukuna almost immediately kills Nanako and Mimiko without any hesitation, and then unleashes his wrath against Jogo. He was taking the piss out of Jogo, but was still dominating him throughout. Jogo even mentions in chapter 112 that Sukuna's power is overwhelmingly evil compared to Gojo. Jogo in chapter 115 unleashes his maximum meteor attack, which is basically Ace's Entei attack, but it was still easy for Sukuna to dodge the attack. Oh, and both Sukuna and Akainu are fire specialists. So we had two guys being released nearly halfway through the arc who happen to specialize and have supernatural fire attacks. Both of them did major damage when they entered the fight. Akainu was taking on both the Whitebeard crew. Even Marco and Vista, who are top commanders of the Whitebeard pirates, could only stall him, but even they still couldn't do any damage to him. In chapter 117, Megumi was pushed into a corner, and as a last-minute tactic, he summoned a Shikigami that has never been defeated, the Shikigami, the 8-armed divine general Mahoraga. Sukuna, whilst he did have some difficulty even using his domain expansion Malevolent Shrine against Mahoraga, which Mahoraga tanked and regenerated from Sukuna's slice attacks. However, Sukuna in chapter 119 unleashed his fire technique Cleave, which is basically a fire arrow, which then obliterates Mahoraga. So both Akainu and Sukuna showed off how beastly they are in strength, but also showed how ruthless and evil they can be, with Sukuna killing innocents all over Shibuya, as well as the two girls who literally did nothing wrong to him. Whilst Akainu was destroying pirates left, right and center, whilst almost killed a fan-favorite pure-hearted character who also was a part of the Marines in Kobe. If it weren't for Shanks, Kobe would have been killed at the end of Marineford. But for me, the biggest similarity that Akainu and Sukuna have is the emotional damage they give to our main character. Akainu killed Ace, which sent Luffy into a shock, which put him out of commission for the remainder of the arc. And Sukuna went on a mad rampage, killing innocent people, which is Yuji's worst nightmare, as he feels he is responsible for those killings that Sukuna did, because he wasn't able to stop them from being killed. As we see in the very next chapter, in chapter 120, where Yuji is questioning himself, calling himself a murderer, and that he needs to die. Even in his fight against Mahito, he was struggling and was literally getting an absolute battering by Mahito because of his mental shock that Yuji is facing. When you read chapter 127, you can see Yuji is at his breaking point, and it's mainly due to Sukuna. Because of the amount of people that Sukuna killed, Yuji is forcing himself to save even more people, but he's at that point in the arc where he couldn't forgive himself because of Sukuna. It's only until Todo shows up and gives Yuji the pep talk that he needs, that is when Yuji finally comes back to his senses. But again, in both arcs, we have our heroes at their lowest point in the story. Luffy seeing Ace die in the hands of Akainu, whilst Yuji seeing hundreds dead thanks to Sukuna. And as a result, at the end of both arcs, Yuji and Luffy essentially lose. They failed their arc objective in saving Ace and Gojo. Whilst they are trying to hatch a plan in the Culling Games to try and save Gojo, many have died in this arc, including the other mentor figure that Yuji had, and that was Nanami, when he died in the hands of Mahito in chapter 120. So in a way, even though Gojo is not dead, a big brother figure for Yuji did end up dying right in front of him, very similar to how Ace died in front of Luffy. Now, there are a few things the Shibuya arc does which is different to Marineford. Firstly, Yuji has a major 1v1 fight against Chozo, from chapters 101 to 105, with Yuji being completely knocked out in chapter 106. But that fight is probably my favorite fight in the whole series so far. It's a straight up street fight. They're fighting in the toilet with the water system all exploding, and it came to a point where they don't even use techniques anymore and were just punching the shit out of each other in chapter 105. In Marineford, we didn't really see Luffy have a straight up 1v1 against any of the Marines. Yes, he had his moments against the 3 admirals, Mihawk, and various other vice admirals, but every time Luffy is about to engage in a 1v1 fight, there will be another character saving him, such as Vista blocking Mihawk, or Marco saving Luffy against both Akainu and Aokiji. Kuma was stopped by Ivankov, and Luffy had Jinbei literally all the way in his journey through Marineford assisting him against the monsters of the Marines. This is understandable as Luffy is nowhere near ready to fight against these beasts, so it's good that we didn't get Luffy have a 1v1 fight. But seeing Yuji have a fight by himself helped us gauge how strong Yuji is so far in the series. It's almost the complete opposite of Luffy, where we see Luffy fight the main antagonist of an arc 1v1 throughout the entire story, apart from the Marineford War. With Yuji, it's the reverse. We see him always teaming up against the antagonists. Even in this very arc before his 1v1 against Chozo, Yuji teamed up with Megumi against Awasaka to take down the barrier. So this was like a rare sight to see Yuji fight against Chozo 1v1, and even then he still had Mekamaru helping him out. But we have to see this, because we need to see if Yuji can handle the pressure to fight serious opponents by himself, rather than him turning to Gojo and the others or reverting back to Sukuna for help. He is Sukuna's vessel. That in itself brings a whole world worth of pressure. We're talking about a demon that can potentially even beat Gojo 1v1 if he has eaten all 20 of his fingers. Gojo is able to handle situations by himself. Yuji has to now learn to do the same. He can't keep having everyone else bail him out. So this fight was crucial just to see the development of Yuji's character and strength. After the Marineford War, it was Jinbei who snapped Luffy out of his depression by reminding him what he still has, whereas in the Shibuya arc, it was in the middle of the arc where Todo is saying to Yuji that all Jujutsu sorcerers are allies, and their friends who have died are never truly gone. Yuji needed to hear this, as he feels he is responsible for all those people dying in this arc. But even after this arc, Yuji has not been the same. He is not as cheerful as he once was. Look at chapter 143. He tells Megumi that as long as he is alive, Megumi will suffer. Even after the arc is finished, Yuji cannot find the strength to forgive himself for Sukuna's actions. If Megumi dies in the hands of Sukuna, Yuji will only blame himself for it. Yuji is fully traumatized by Sukuna's actions, but he still has to move forward and get over this trauma. Whereas Luffy looks like he is back to his usual self, but when he needs to be serious, he will be. He didn't let the death of Ace traumatize him, as he is able to reveal that Ace died to Otama and Yamato in the Wano arc. So there are a few differences between the two arcs, but you can tell Akutami is a massive One Piece fan, as he grew up on the big three just like the rest of us. When both arcs ended, our heroes were in a worse state in terms of the world building of their stories. Luffy going into Marineford was known throughout the Marines, but after Marineford, he has a higher bounty. He is known as the Son of Dragon, who is the world's most wanted man leading the revolutionary army. He's also the brother of Ace, who is the son of the Pirate King Gold D. Roger, and he was the leading figure in the war against the Marines along with the Whitebeard pirates. Luffy gained infamy after the Marineford War. Similarly, before the Shibuya arc, Yuji's death sentence was put on pause. However, after the Shibuya arc, as stated in chapter 137, Yuji's death penalty suspension has now been revoked and the execution is to be carried out immediately. There are now at least 10 million cursed spirits released at the end of the arc. Gojo has now been deemed an accomplice in the Shibuya Incident and is permanently exiled from the Jujutsu world. If he is removed from the seal, it will be deemed as a criminal act. The principal of Tokyo Jujutsu High will also receive the death penalty in the belief of him inciting Gojo and Geto in causing the Shibuya Incident. Both arcs had major ramifications to not only our characters, but to the world of each story. It propelled the pacing for the story going forward and showed us how dark each story can be by showing us major deaths and how low our characters can get. I love both of these arcs. They are amongst my favorite in all of anime. What do you guys think? Do you feel the Shibuya arc is the Marineford of Jujutsu Kaisen? Let me know in the comments down below.